not. I was just starting to add.
Okay.
I'll start by standing and then sit myself. I want to do a small introduction to the Expo.
We're good.
15 seconds.
All right, make sure my phone is off. Phones are off.
Oh my goodness. Set your phone to stun.
We're going to steal you
For what?
to be in our little cluster.
No, I'm going to steal your Polish student.
Uh-oh, there's going to be some musical chairs. Then you guys can talk about languages. Good Lord.
All right, so we're going to start. Are we rolling? I can't see.
Yes, we're rolling. We're good.
Okay, very good. Good morning, everybody. My name is Philip Napoli. I am the Dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. Welcome to the beginning of the 6th Annual HSS Humanities and Social Science Expo, which runs today and tomorrow, the 27th and 28th. And then we have events running for the remainder of the week, which we're calling Expo Week. And in the next 2 days, there are 23 events, more than 100 student presenters in panels like this one in Woody-Tanger and across the school. I want to welcome everybody and thank you all for being here. This morning's presentation is about student-faculty mentorship pairs. One of the signature elements of education at Brooklyn College is the fact that you can get a really good, tight relationship with your faculty mentors. All you have to do is start to ask questions. And this morning we're going to talk to faculty mentor pairs with students. I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to sit down and join the group because one of my mentees is here with us. So I'm going to sit, but before I do, I would like the panel to go around and introduce yourself. Just say your name, and maybe as we go around the semicircle, the students should introduce your research projects. Would you please start? Let's start with Carla. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Carla España. I'm in Puerto Rican and Latinx Studies, and here with my mentee.
Hi, I'm Manuel Martinez, and I'm a major in childhood bilingual and Puerto Rican and Latinx Studies. My research project focuses on school-family partnerships, especially within working-class Latin and families.
I'm Professor Lauren Mancia. I'm in history, and I'm here with
Julia Chisnowicz. I'm a Spanish translation major, but my research is understanding Catalan identity.
Hi, my name is Veronica. I'm a recent alumni from this college. Our research focused on Ukrainian war, specifically Ukrainian feminist organizations' response to Russia's use of conflict-related sexual violence since 2014.
And I'm Professor Janice Johnson. I'm a professor in women's and gender studies and political science. And what Veronica has not mentioned is that we submitted it. It's under revise and resubmit.
Wow.
So we're
My mentor introduced himself. I'm Lena Mazzilli. I'm a junior studying history, and our research project is a oral history project on the history of the New York City Vietnam Memorial. This project has gone on for around like two years, and we're focusing on varying historical narratives of
Very good. Well, thank you and welcome to everybody, and I do appreciate your coming out early on a Monday morning. Manuel, will you tell us how your mentoring relationship began and what drew you guys to work together?
Yeah, so at first I had a few classes with Professor España, and then little by little I would go to our office hours and we just started talking, and then she actually was the one to motivate me to apply for the TAO fellowship, and that's where we worked on a research project together, and that was with working on Latina representation in higher ed. So we did focus groups and interviews with my classmates, and so that was really fun. And then as part of that, she pushed me to apply to Melanie's, which I am now first year fellow.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let me turn it back to Professor España. Talk to me about what made you want to do this work together.
Manuel had really great questions, and he always came to office hours not only asking questions regarding the class content, like on our syllabus or readings, but there were questions about life after Brooklyn College. And then he had these questions about phenomena that he was observing in his schools and in his sites that he would go to. So whether it was questions about the relationship between schools and community, or how families were welcomed or not welcomed into schools and partnerships, that's when I sensed, like, there's a budding researcher here. And I said, you know what, or that's when I welcomed him into this research project we did through the TAO mentorship. And I said, let's work on IRB together. Let's get your feet wet with, starting with all the researcher to-do list items. And that developed into his Mellon research. So for me, it was just about being a good listener and being attuned and being in tension with what were his interests and trying to guide him in that path.
So there's an openness that you seem to have demonstrated. Manuel, did that resonate with you? Was she open to the what you needed to do, what you wanted to do?
Oh, yeah, so she was always asking me more questions. I was like, I was like, I have this, and then she would be like, well, like why? Like, explain more. And so it made me think more like, well, why am I even asking this question to start with?
That's fabulous. Thank you very much. Julia, tell us a little bit about what drew the two of you guys together.
Well, it was actually when I had to play Jesus Christ. Well, basically, I took a class last year with and I actually hadn't done much in medieval world history of that. And so I took this class really unexpectedly, kind of going into it and accepting what would come. And at the end of it, we were invited to go to Toronto to do a cyclic, a reenactment, a re-performance of mystery plays that would have been done in medieval York. And at the end of it, I think we sort of learned so much about drama and play and how it's a dialogue with the surroundings around you and the people around you. And so I'm thinking to myself, what does this mean in my kind of life? And I'm going to Barcelona next semester. How can I connect that? And that's when it hit me. What if I studied this exact mystery plays and how that affects community and identity? But there. I brought one Nancy on board.
Professor Mansi, why don't you tell us a little bit about your perspective on that question?
Yeah. So there are a whole bunch of performance researchers who are doing medieval history work. And so those performance researchers are asking, how did drama, how did theater look before we had stages, before we had Shakespeare, before we had closed doors around theaters, and how it looked was community participation. And so when I thought about who the community would be that I would bring in to create kind of guild that we would go to Toronto and perform these plays with, I thought these Brooklyn College students, and Lena was also one of them. This is Eve over here, Jesus Christ / Satan right here. And that the fact that that is funny is exactly how medieval theater worked, right? Is that like Professor Knapp knows Lena in one class, but then sees her transform as Eve. And so I thought this was a really great translation for medieval research, but also an amazing opportunity.
Can you tell us a little tiny bit more about the Toronto trip? Because that sounds pretty darn cool.
It was a bunch of universities that took part of this, and also
churches.
Yeah.
So it was like 25 groups of people from across North America came as small groups, small performance groups that were like the guilds that would do these performances in the middle.
yes, exactly. So and we were the
Yes.
and so we had to somehow incorporate that in our performances, and we did. Each of us did 3 performances. They only lasted to be 15 minutes, and started at 6 a.m. with the creation of the world, and ended at midnight with the final judgment. And this would have been done in medieval York as well, all day. You'd be moving from station to station outside.
What'd you get out of that? Tell me about what you got.
I think out of all of it, you kind of become so aware and attentive to your surroundings. At some point, like I remember we were doing the death of Christ, and at the same time as Christ was being put up on the cross, there was a baby crying in the audience, and so you think like everything seems to have meaning. And that's something that you kind of learn. That's not something that you could get from an archive by reading medieval research. It's something that you learn that would have definitely happened. So, and also the sense of community, really, amongst the actors, but also even when we did it on the quad, that kind of dual identity, when people see me as Jesus all of a sudden on the quad, and that's a little bit confusing, or I'm Satan giving it out. You know? So that's the kind of connotation that we have in time to have John faith, John as the disciple, you know. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Veronica, tell us a little bit about what drew the two of you guys to work together. What was the start of this?
Where do I start? I moved from Ukraine about 10 years ago when I was 13. So my whole family is there. And when the full invasion happened too, I really felt guilty for here when my family struggles there. And I was trying to find how could I help. And besides our families going to church and donating and just sending to my family and other families, I wanted to do something more. And I was also part of a colleague, and we had to do the senior. So I thought it would be do something about my country. And I started looking for a professor at Brooklyn College who would do something like this. And I went on the website, I tried searching up humanities and other topics, and I came across Professor Johnson, and then my hunt began to see how I could. And coincidentally, I think Professor Keith, who I took history class with, invited me to spend a junior year to volunteer at. And it was in this same auditorium. And I had to just help out with some speakers and microphones, and Professor Johnson was there. So it was like perfect opportunity to meet. So I came up, we spoke a little bit, and we said to come back next year. And basically that's how we started. My senior year, I emailed Professor Johnson, we met up, and we started talking about how your feminist research and your involvement in Russia could be combining my aspiration.
Will you take that question up too?
Yeah, so, we kind of took a leap. It sounds like you all had a relationship.
Yeah.
We didn't really have a relationship. I remember distinctly when you showed up in my office, and I was like, oh. And I'm just kind of like, I often say yes to students because you just never know where it's going to go. But I think, you had been present at the Ukraine event, which had been the commemoration of the first year of war, and lost my train of thought. But it was also, so it spoke to my moral commitment, which I think is maybe where our project, like I noticed yours was about curiosity and formativity, right, and engagement, and ours was really about a moral commitment. I had been trained, I'm US born, trained as a Russianist, which is a very particular perspective. And I have been writing about decolonizing that perspective and thinking about what it means. Ever since the first part of the invasion of Ukraine, which happened in 2014, I've been trying to figure out how to do that and really rethink the way that I saw the world. And so Veronica shows up and I was like, oh. And my focus had mostly been on gender violence. And I was like, well, I got to figure out, if you recall, there was tremendous gender and sexual violence that happened in the first couple months of the full-scale invasion. And I was like, well, let's look into this and see if I can help. I speak Russian. I don't speak Ukrainian. I can understand Ukrainian, but it was really helpful to have somebody who was from Ukraine who could speak Ukrainian. And it was also I had this complicated. I didn't want you to study the war as an example of violence, right? So I took on the part that was about the violence. And we moved to you focusing on the feminist response to it to kind of empower them, us, you in that so that we could kind of talk about what really happened. And I could hold space for the violence, but also I didn't want to re-traumatize anybody.
These are really, really interesting answers. I'm going to turn to Lena, whose answer I happen to know, but let's talk a little bit about how we got connected on the oral history work.
So in my freshman year at Brooklyn College, I came in as a Macaulay honors student, and I was actually interested in neuroscience major. So I was doing that, and then I had to take an honors course for environment, and I happened to take, well, actually my advisor recommended, Professor Napoli, she recommended that I take his Shape of the Modern World course, which is the course for history majors, because I told my advisor I had an interest in history. I just really pursued it because I was like, so I came in, and at the end of the semester, I had to do an oral history project, and I did it on my family during the Black Decade in Algeria, and interviewing them about that. And then I also had a similar experience of going to his office hours and talking a lot, and then he asked me if I wanted to do a TAL mentorship program with him in the spring of 2025. And it sounds like all of you had a personal connection and a previous background knowledge of your topics before you started. I know nothing about Vietnam veterans. I kind of just jumped in, and I really like. I pat myself on the back for jumping in and like taking that risk of researching something that I didn't know a lot about, but also I'm grateful to Professor Napoli for encouraging me because I have learned so much from that project, and he asked me to join him on his research on writing a book about one of the Vietnam Veterans of America presidents, John Rowan. And it could be asked, like, well, what does the student really contribute to this if it's his topic and I'm with it? Well, with oral history, it's so different as a young woman, as a young student, going to these Vietnam veterans, like my identity completely changes the conversation, and it brings so many different kinds of dialogue that Professor Napoli wouldn't be able to do on his own. So I think I've contributed in that way, but the way that Professor Napoli has helped me in my academic career, well, he made me a history major. And that, like, I really found my niche and like my passion that I wouldn't find in any other discipline, and we're still continuing this project even after the TAL mentorship program ended. We've been going on 2 years now, and like I'm also in mythology, and it's going to be a new thesis. So, like, and he started on focusing on John Rowan, former president of EVA, and as we worked together, like I was asking questions about space and how people think of space when they go to a memorial commemorating Vietnam veterans. How does their identity change how they see that memorial wall? What do the veterans think of the wall and how to see it? And like those questions about like varying historical narratives in memorial spaces like really interested me. And so our project developed into something totally different than we first started the TAL program. So like something that it's really taught me is that to kind of like trust yourself sometimes and like to trust your mentor. And I think that's like really, something really valuable, and I'm really grateful to have that like.
I could say well, a lot about Lena, but I will only say that she has contributed directly to my work in ways that have pushed my historical understanding, but also well, let's go to the next, the question of trust, because the issue of trust runs across all of our relationships, and I will tell the world that I absolutely trust Lena's professional, emotional judgment about how to deal with folks who are much older and much different. So this is one of those places in which I think trust matters. I'd like the rest of you guys to think a little bit about the question of trust and where it shows up in your relationships. Carla, would you take that one up?
I think the first example could be that in our initial conversations, Manuel came to me as a childhood bilingual education major. And his questions were at the intersection of education, but also ethnic studies and Puerto Rican Latinx studies. And so the issue of trust, I think, was revealed in those initial conversations where he was interested in also sociology and thinking about his life after Brooklyn College as me. These are questions that he could pursue in graduate work in sociology or ethnic studies. And I'm coming from years and years of recruitment and sustaining teachers for New York City public schools, right? That's been like my mission as a scholar. And I had to trust Manuel's like interests and trust that we had the support that we could give him to expand those interests and find ways to answer those questions. And so that's where we saw it out through Mellon and having him take courses. Now are you taking Intro to Sociology, right, this fall? And he's pursuing like looking into sociology programs. So I think it was a lot about trusting that Manuel knows his life experience best and his questions best. And how could I be someone that could support this interest, but also have him also given the connections that would be necessary. So we presented, right? Well, he presented at SUNY Binghamton at a conference. I just went to support, and we published together, right? So we published a guide for a book called The Grief Keeper, and it's a young adult novel that is on issues of immigration and immigration injustice. And through that process, it was me like leaning into like, Manuel's got this. And so I think both into the navigating career choices and majors, to publication and presenting.
And well, let's flip it. Where's the trust, and where does trust play its role in your relationship?
She tells me to do something. And I do. So
So we have a lot of to-do lists. Like, I have examples. If anyone needs some documents, I have saved. I'm happy to share.
right, so as like we said before, I would go to her office hours, and she make me think more, and then she would tell me, oh, apply to this. And at first I was like, I don't really want to. Like, I was like, I'm just a childhood major. I'm trying to like get through this now and call it a day, right? But she was like, no, you should do it. And she was like always telling me, you should do it. You should do it. Have you done it? And eventually I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so I did it. And that's how we did TAO. And so I applied. Well, we both applied. And then for Melon, it was also, you should do it. And she was like, go find this professor, talk to them. I was like, okay, right. And so I guess part of that trust was, I guess she's been through this. And so I know that she's not going to take me down the wrong path. And I think part of that also led to me like going from just a concentration in pearls to now being a major. And now I'm like going to do a minor in sociology or minor in Spanish. So it's like, I know that she's been down the path. So I'm like, okay, you tell me to jump and I'll jump.
Thank you. Julia, there seems to be a different kind of trust in your relationship. There's a kind of, if I was to guess at it, there's a kind of emotional trust that's about like trusting yourself as a performer, as a learner.
That's kind of, I didn't know how to answer this question. It was sort of innate trust that I didn't even think about it. I know Professor Mesa has been studying, her recent scholarship is in performance. And so whenever I would come into office hours, she would have like, she would just know. Like, it's almost like a psychologist prescribing medication. It's like, here's the documents you have to read to know how to do this, And it was just like, I knew I could support it, and also she had, so that when I did go to academia, and this is for my research, my thesis as well, I obviously just had been doing this new methodology for a semester, so I was like, how do I do this on my own now? But I knew I wasn't. And then re-performance, what really happens in this methodology is that there's many ways you can do it. It's a trial and error. And I always knew that anything I did to ask any doubts.
So failure isn't really something that worries you, but you trust her ability to know what you can do.
Yes.
It sounds.
Yes, of course. And everything can be redone, re-performed in several ways, and each time you discover something.
Fabulous. Laura, will you take that one up too?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the nature of this project is that there isn't failure. It's about discovery through the process. I think that's true in oral history, right? I think it sounds like it's true even, Manuel, in the way that you were talking about navigating your college career, that so many people are like, I'm a childhood and education major, I'm going to just do that. And then you're like, whoa, sociology, Spanish, right? I mean, HSS gives you this opportunity to navigate your way around and do it slower. And our re-performance work also is about doing it slow, doing it again, and learning from the process. And I will also say as a professor that I was never modeled, even as a graduate student, the idea that as a student I had knowledge that was useful to my ex-professor. And I think that what this re-performance also does is it creates a very horizontal classroom, which is wonderful, but also creates a horizontal research environment. So the work that Julia and Lena and all of these students from 25 universities did will now be studied by professors. And so their bodies, their re-performance, their exploration is the data experts will then use because they acknowledge that they are experts. That's the trust.
Monica, take that one up too.
I thought through the response, and I think for me at least, I didn't realize how long the research takes. It started as like this small one semester thesis, turned into a town internship, and then I graduated 24, and we're still at it. I think for me, trust involves in like the remote work that we do, because we barely see each other now, and I just trust you that when we have those tasks, that you complete your own, as well as you have a big trust in me to complete my own task with thorough research. that then we don't have to check up on each other, we don't have to check each other's research, we just kind of keep these happen and bring this research together. So I think for us, trust is that both are involved in this. Very, a lot of honesty and a lot of passion.
Professor Johnson, will you take that one?
I was thinking about what you all were saying, how education has shifted, and I think that the mentoring really helps us kind of bring that to fruition. When I first started teaching, we had encyclopedias, we didn't have Wikipedia, right? And so we were often presenting, this is a long time, we were presenting information to our students that wasn't really readily available. And I'm still kind of wrestling what that means now with AI, right? Like almost everything I can present in the classroom, AI can do like a quick summary of it. Not great, but not terrible, frankly. And so what does it mean that we're doing? And I think what I hope we're doing is empowering, engaging, learning together. And that's hard to do in the classroom. I'm still really thinking about that, but that's a big part of my pedagogy. But in a mentoring relationship, it's very iterative. Like one of the first things I say to students is like, you're not going to get this wrong. I'm going to give you something that you don't know what you're doing. Just do it. You come back and we'll be like, okay, that worked. That didn't work. But like so we did kind of this, we used online research to study what was going on in Ukraine, which is there's strengths and weaknesses to that. But you know Ukrainian much better than I do. You're a native to social media in ways that I'm not. And I knew more about how to do systematic methodologies, but I saw that you were very serious about doing things in very kind of careful ways. And so it was an iterative process in which you did it, we talked about how to do it differently or maybe to hone it or to revise it. And then at some point I was like, I should turn this into a real article. You're like, sure. And I was like, it'll be easy. Right?
We already have it.
I know. And then like I started into it and I was like, it's not as easy as I thought. And then we submitted it to one journal. And they came back to us with a revise and resubmit, but it wasn't the right home. And so we've now we sent it off to a journal based in the Czech Republic or Czechia. And now we have a revise and resubmit. So it's been a very long process, and I appreciate that you trusted me. But I also just felt like all of this came out of, like it's a great place for this because it is Eastern European, like it speaks to the right audience. And so, but I really, really appreciate hearing all of us talking about like how mentoring really fosters a different way of being with our students.
Let me take that one up for Lena. Lena, we've spent a lot of time outside the classroom together. What's the impact of that kind of work? Because it's been labor, it's been serious work. What's that work like for you, and what have you gotten out of that?
I think one of the greatest things I've learned from this work is close listening and also being open to different perspectives. When you're at a certain institution and you're in a classroom and you have professors in the same department, you can find that you find the same viewpoints and ideas regurgitated, and it's kind of like an echo chamber. When I step out of the classroom and I get out of that like academic space where everybody, in academia, everyone has guidelines, you have to say certain things, you have to say this to publish, don't say this to publish. And like that comes through with professors and it's not their fault. Of course, like academia has its constraints, but like when I go out of the classroom and I talk to Vietnam veterans who are in all walks of life, some of them are authors, some of them are academics, some of them work for the city, some of them are retired and spend time with their family, some of them are doing volunteer grassroots work, some of them continue advocating for members in the military. And I talk to all these people and it's like really raw, and what I get from those conversations I could never get from reading like archive material or watching videos from the war or looking at images from the war or audio. Like I could never get that same experience as sitting down with somebody, having lunch with them and just talking about their life story. It's something that really cannot be replicated in the classroom, and it's like one of the beauties of oral history is that you don't only get a primary source material that, like as you said, will be used by experts in the future, but you're also fostering your own personal growth and meeting people. And like as a young person, that's really important for me right now, that as I go through life, I'm not only sitting in the classroom and doing assignments and turning in stuff for a grade, I'm also going out and having conversations and propelling my life trajectory that way. Like, as, for example, this project has made me interested in law, and also working in Napoli has made me interested in law. And one of the main people I work with is Robert Santos, and he was an environmental lawyer, and like I get to network that way as well. So it's really.
Let's take up a kind of difficult topic, misunderstandings. Things that go wrong and how you fix them. Does anybody want to take that one up?
I could. But
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll do this, Lena.
So, like with oral history, I'll talk first about misunderstandings, like with the interviewees. That can be really difficult because, of course, they're of a different generation, of a different age. There's miscommunication. Some of them like lose their emails or like stuff like that, or like they call me in the middle of the night because like I guess they don't think that it's wrong. They're like, hey, when's our interview again? So there's like misunderstandings like that. But as I said, like that with the oral history territory and like learning to like professionally handle those situations, because once you get into the workforce or like you whatever like path you take, there's going to be situations where there's misunderstandings with your colleagues and like people you work with or like clients or anybody that like, you work for. With Professor Napoli, sometimes I think there could be misunderstandings because he has been doing this work like so much longer than I have, and he has a different experience with this kind of research, and he has a different perspective of like how oral history should go. And I'm like, I'll admit I'm very new to this compared to his expertise, and sometimes there's misunderstandings like, oh, why did you ask this question, or why didn't you ask this question, or maybe I would have said this but you didn't say that, so maybe next. But also like having those dialogues is also really important because, as you said, we're kind of like breaking this barrier of like you're the expert and you know everything and I can't have a say, or also that maybe me, like sometimes I'm too confident and I'm like, oh, doesn't always but like also like sitting down and, as I said, like practicing that like close listening and intentional listening and understanding each other. Like what I learned from those interviews, talking to them, it also teaches me how to talk, like engage in professional discussion better with my professors, better with my colleagues, my peers. So yeah, misunderstandings I won't say can be, they are very important because what you make of those misunderstandings and how you resolve them, and how you move forward is the important part. So like you shouldn't be afraid of misunderstanding each other because of course you will. We're different ages, different generations, different amount like years of expertise. So that was a long answer. Sorry, but yeah, that's what I know.
Anybody else want to take this one up on the question?
I was thinking about, I was given the advice on mentorship that no one should have just one mentor, right? And because for many of you, it's like this is the start of the journey and you have, one maybe official mentor through a program, whether it's TAO or Mellon Mays or the Mellon Transfer Student Research Program, that you might have an official one on paper, but hopefully you have more than one, right? And so with Manuel, something that has helped me on this journey is considering all the expectations that he has that are on his plate as a student, and then the expectations that I have in our research or the research that he's doing that I'm guiding. And so we had to have a document, I love my charts and documents, where it's, okay, what do you need to do and by when for your research course with Professor Mitchell? What do you need to do by when for your Mellon Mays course, right? What do you need to do for this research you're doing together? And that helped with the misunderstandings because originally we had these very ambitious ideas on different research projects. And then once we started going through IRB, we have to amend our timeline. And so I think that's helped in clarifying expectations.
Either one of you guys want to take up this question? Are there concrete examples of a misunderstanding that would be helpful?
I have one very specific example. I'll try to sum it up as much as I can. But basically, in my research, I went to monasteries as well. And one of these monasteries was this monastery called Monasterio de Pedralbes, which is like around 50 minutes away from Barcelona. And in this monastery, it was always presented as something that was a tradition where they do these history-related Corpus Christi processions, which are these processions that also included place. But I wasn't finding it. And when I went there, I was like, this is such a huge space. And I'm like, surely, and there was like a whole, like, it just kept the same way as it would have been back then. A whole route that would process out of the monastery. So I was like, surely something happened there. And I just wasn't finding it. And it turns out the answer was pretty clear. And Professor Vincent told me that this monastery, well, it belongs to Fort Clare's nuns, which are nuns that are very cloistered. They just don't go out. So it wouldn't have happened outdoors. And so I was like, well, now I can't really add this to research, but I did all of this. And I went there and I walked around everything. But then we did more research on it, and I did find some documents that said that there was a bishop selling indulgences just to show up there and be there. And there was also that the Fort Clare's nuns, they only enter in with their adults, meaning that they would have actually seen the processions happen in Barcelona before entering in. So, and then there's also research that tells us that the Clare nuns actually did do all the processions, but within their monastery. So I was like, but this isn't really helping how this represents community and Caroline identity. But it does, because the fact that they brought it into their cloister, that's so cloistered, and they still would have done these processions and history plays, it shows how important this tradition was, and to the fact that you still have to be indoors and people will still come outside. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Very specific.
I just sort of to build on that, and I feel like this is very, very similar to parenting, right? But like we have to learn to be a mentor, we have to learn to be a parent, right? We have to learn when to control what is happening and when to let it go, right? And so the example that I have, although that's also another example of it, where you're talking about a monastery, I don't know what's gonna, and then you found the answer yourself. But another example is that Julia is a very beautiful dancer. And when we were rehearsing her serpent, she was doing a lot of dance, which I thought initially was like, oh, this is not medieval. Like to have this much choreography is not medieval. And I sort of felt like, do I tell her? Do I not tell her? But through the readings that we were doing and through the understanding that we were doing, she naturally, without my intervention, without my impulse to be like, stop dancing, right? She like created a beautiful serpent that was her own movement. And so that's an example of how like Julia about the monastery learned on her own just by me giving her space. And I learned as a mentor just by giving Julia space. So that's more trust and misunderstanding that ends in more trust.
Yeah.
What about the two of you guys? Have you seen productive misunderstandings?
Our, like Professor Johnson mentioned, our research mainly involved online research, so I had to go on countless websites of feminist organizations in Ukraine and Russian, Ukrainian, and English, and to go a lot of deep dive into their past articles from 5 years ago. I also had to go through their social media, scrolling tons of posts, and not finding anything. And after like hours and hours of research, I had to come back and be like, I think this is all they have. And you're like, well, I spoke with one of the people from this organization, and that they actually have this initiative. And I spent countless hours on that organization, and I couldn't find it. I felt such a failure. And I just put the name of the initiative that you bring up. I can't remember the organization right now. It was something about the hotline. And I researched it, and obviously it was right there. And that was just like one of the many examples of that. I've never done academic research, so it was all new. And I think TAL mentorship program, like the mentorship in general, the relationship, just helps you do these mistakes. Like if you're in a classroom, you don't have time to do hours and hours of research, submit something, and then, oh, actually, this is the right answer, go try it again. That doesn't happen in classrooms, but it happens in mentorships.
How has this changed you? I'm going to start with Lena.
No pressure.
Okay. I have like kind of personal story, I guess. So in my freshman year, the first time I met Professor Napoli, I was in tears. Because I asked, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I came wanting to pursue college, like doing one thing, and then like I really like history and I really like this. I was like jumping so many classes, and I was comparing myself to my peers who like already knew what they wanted to do, and they were getting like lab hours and like becoming doctors, like they were like 18. So I was like, oh my gosh, like what am I gonna do? And what this doing this research has taught me is, again, the idea of like it's okay to make mistakes and not know sometimes, and that the further you go in your like academic journey, the more you'll figure it out, and you kind of just have to trust the process. And like we've said trust so many times, but it's really the core tenet of this like student mentor relationship, because I have to trust that when he says, maybe you should go to law school, I have to trust him and say, okay, I'll think about that. It's not something that I never thought was possible. I never thought I was smart enough. But
You had this conversation, yeah?
but now it's like I went from like crying in his office about not knowing what to do to sitting here and being confident in my answers and being confident in that I deserve to be here and I deserve to do this research with a doctor. So it's just really incredible that this project and working with personality taught me confidence and audacity. Also. And like the audacity to like take space as a young female researcher when a lot of people would tell me.
To pick up the phone, call one of the most highly decorated Vietnam veterans in New York State and say, you need to come to lunch.
And I drive all the way to my neighborhood.
Well done.
Janet, how has this changed you? Maybe your perspective on teaching? Maybe.
That's a great question. I have for many years taken on Russian, Ukrainian speaking, various Eastern European students. I was thinking about something you said, Lauren, like years ago. I remember talking to an administrator here about like how lucky we were to have students with all of these varied backgrounds. And it's not that you have to write on Ukraine if you're Ukrainian, but if you do speak Ukrainian and want to write about Ukraine, like that's, I taught at other places and I didn't have that opportunity. So, so that's been a long-term practice, and that's really taught me to think differently about my research. It helps me expand my research. It helps me change my perspective. Like working with Veronica, and I also have a PhD student who's Ukrainian, Ina, who is also an MA student at Brooklyn College, and that has been a really big part of my decolonization project, right? Like there was the intellectual way I went about it, to think about what does it mean to think about the Soviet Union and Russia as an empire in ways that a lot of leftists don't see what they were doing in places like Ukraine. And so I had the kind of academic, theoretical perspective, but the really concrete, like, the conversations I've had with you and Ina, both about, what does it feel like to be in this war, and what are the things that are important to you? I learned more about, I have not gone back to Ukraine since the war because I thought about it, but I don't like war. I don't want to be in the trauma either. And it's just given me, I think those conversations, like all the conversations we've had about like, how you celebrate Christmas and like helping me learn a little Ukrainian, like all those things I feel are important to changing the way that I think about what I study.
Manuel, I want to hear from you. In what ways has this relationship changed you?
Well, like I mentioned, I was a childhood bilingual major. And so for me, it was just coming to do that and calling it a day, get my teaching job, and then come back for my master's. And then as we just asking more questions and finding, well, why? Right? So then I guess it definitely gave me a new perspective. And so afterwards, when I would go into schools, I would have these questions that I had asked her in office hours. And like it made me more open to like looking at it more than like, oh, why is the teacher just doing this? Like looking at it just from pedagogy, but it's looking at it from now a sociological perspective or an ethnic studies perspective. And then I think now that, so I went just like, oh, I'm going to be a teacher. And now because of Madeline, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get a PhD. I'm going to probably be a college professor. And who knows, maybe I'll come back and we could be coworkers, right? So there's more than what I had thought. And I guess just being open to new ideas really allowed me to go.
Let's go, Manuel.
Start advocating for that line.
Let's go, Dean Napoli.
It's recorded.
Professor Espana, take that one up.
I think for me, what changed was being more expansive in my perspective of how, at the intersection of ethnic studies and education, of what that looks like, particularly in this country at this time. So it's very different than maybe 10 years ago. And so I feel like this relationship has, for me, been more, it's helped me be more attuned to what's going on, because we'd have weekly conversations as to, he was at a PTA meeting and he came back and said, this is what I observed that the language being used in talking to immigrant parents. Or what happens when ICE was just in the school's neighborhood? How did the school respond? Did the school respond? And so we had to have these really difficult conversations about the role of different institutions, about public safety in terms of our immigrant families. And so for me, it was much more than just like helping students do a lesson plan with multicultural literature. Right now, we're talking about life or death situations. We're talking about identity, feeling like we can cultivate communities that feel safe to send their children to schools, and that families feel part of this schooling endeavor. And that's thanks to Manuel's like conversations and him bringing that, right? And me visiting the schools, and then we come back and compare notes, and well, I visited this school in Brooklyn, I went to this school in Manhattan, like what were the, and so I think for me, it's made me think more expansive as to what does it mean to support our students at that intersection of ethnic studies and education.
Professor Mancia, would you want to try this one?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the thing that keeps coming up to me is a personal one, which is that, I think that if we wanted to psychoanalyze why I went to graduate school, it would be because I was like an A student who wanted to please her professors, and that I was constantly seeking the approval of my teacher. And I think that when I got tenure, something changed in my research where I was like, actually, I'm going to do what I want to do. And even if the teachers aren't going to like it. And I started experimenting it with Julia and the students. But I think that like one of the things that is hard in the academy is doing something that is different, that is not logocentric, et cetera. And no one was really going to root for me in doing that. But the power of Julia's rooting for me and doing that, not in my own personal work, but in just her doing it and feeling like it was doing something, right? That our experimentation together. I mean, I didn't know that she adopted my methodology as the framework for her thesis. I was incredibly moved by that, right? But that like it actually had legs, I learned from my students and not from the teachers that I've always looked up to. So, those teachers are now no longer my super ego and my students.
Yeah.
The last question is for the students. What is the advice that you would give to perhaps incoming Brooklyn College students, perhaps other students who are already here, about beginning a mentor-mentee relationship? Julia.
Okay. I think the most important thing is you have to understand that you learn by being and by doing, and you learn constantly every day. And your mentor is there to guide you, and you just have to be very, very open. Before taking the class, I had studied abroad 3 times, and I think as some non-native language, it's literally crucial to being in a place and immersing yourself, and only then do you understand truly how a certain feel like and act. And Professor Espana, I'm going to promote your Chile program because it's actually also an amazing experience, and I think you have discovered more by actually being in Chile than just in the classroom here. And so there's so much to see out there in this world. There's so much to physically embody and see, and Brooklyn College and the mentorships that are here at the basis for you to then go out and explore.
Going out.
What did you say?
Every student always wants to succeed in school, regardless whether you're set on the path to be a doctor or something else, or you came to explore. And I think mentorship helps one way or another. Working with professors one way or another. I always was set on going to school, and I'm in CUNY Law right now. amount of doors the mentorship and our research opened. I'm actually part of the feminist organization in Ukraine that works with Ukrainian attorneys that I researched for hours and hours. And I would not have even thought of like doing some meaningful work with them for research, even though I'm so sad on like being an attorney working in an immigration field. So I think it's just so important to go out if you just talk to professors or you have this little itch of like, I want to do something more. Just look for a random professor that speaks to you and try to hunt them down. Yeah. It's always
Well,
Uh,
advice.
I would say go to office hours. Right? I think it's the time where it's like the secret time where you know where the professor is, where they're at, and because nobody goes, like you have them all to yourself, right? Which everyone else should go to office hours, but I think going to office hours it created a space where like it was still like, oh, I have these questions related to class, but because nobody goes, we had more time to just talk, and then like my ideas and her knowledge just like grew into what I'm now at Mellon and Top.
And I just also want to say, please, is that also you, by going to office hours, by engaging, you acquire things you did essentially gain. And that relationship, like, thanks to Professor Mancia and her letters of recommendations, I got a relationship. And Spanish translation. Medieval history, but, you know, and yet it leads me to my next path in life, you know. Also going to do a master's. So, you know, you just never know where it's going to be.
Lena?
Yeah, I think my number one piece of advice is take chances. Even if you feel like you never thought you would deserve to be working with a professional and to be doing professional research that people respect and that people will read. Take that chance. You do deserve it. And know especially that, well, since this is the humanities panel, I do have to say research is not only for STEM. Research is in all fields, and that your research is valuable and your research is still relevant. And again, with the opportunities, I will say, like, to any student that mentorship is crucial, even if you don't want to do like an official program where you do research together, to have someone that you trust and from is really crucial, because as you said, like, they can open doors for you. Like, my research with Professor Napoli got me to go to Kenya because they were impressed with my grassroots organization research, and I got to work with climate justice feminist organizations in Kenya and meet Nobel Prize laureates. So that's because I decided to go to Professor Napoli's office and cry and to do that TAL mentorship program with him. And now this summer, I'm going to go to Genoa, Italy to do maritime research, which is totally different, but also they were really impressed with my research work that I've done with Professor Napoli. And I mean, I got into the J.K. Watson Fellowship because they were impressed with my research with Napoli. So Professor Napoli is directly responsible, I suppose.
No.
Well, not responsible, but I attribute a lot of my success to him as a mentor. And I think that, you know, no one can do things all on their own. Everyone needs some help. Professors need help from their students, and students need help from their professors. And being at an academic institution, like, please take the resources that are given to you, because the professors didn't apply to professors just to teach and go. And if they did, then they need to rethink. Because to be a professor is to, like, really be there for your students, and they want to be there for you, like, trust they want to be there. And I find that especially, like, probably in the humanities, where it's, like, our professors really want to see you succeed, and they want you to be more than what you were when you came through their office.
Right. I'll just conclude by saying what I think I heard from the panel is that this relationship, this mentor-mentee relationship, is productive, it's generative, it's a moral commitment, it's a moral matter for all of us, I think. It's expansive, and it changes lives. And I would urge anybody in the audience, anybody who might ever hear this tape, to take advantage of these kinds of opportunities that are here at the college for you. Thank you all.